We're here now with Jim Schwab. Jim is another one of our presenters, and I know you're familiar with this conference, right? You've been here?
I've been here a few times. Yeah.
Very good. So Jim, for our viewers at home, what was the topic of your presentation?
Basically, it was about integrating hazard mitigation as a planning priority in your communities and how to integrate that throughout the whole of the community planning process.
Very good. So you are part of the American Planning Association, and I know that APA really has a focus on hazard preparation and kind of how we prepare as communities. How does that fit into the broader topic of planning for a community?
Well, actually, I actually retired as a staff person, but I was managing their hazards planning center. So basically, I crafted a lot of the program that they have introduced.
Very good.
But now I'm chair-elect of the Hazard Mitigation and Disaster Recovery Planning Division, which is one of their member divisions, and that's the capacity in which I came here.
Perfect.
Along with the co-presenter from the Des Moines area, Polk County.
Yeah.
And the essence of what we were presenting yesterday was one of the projects we had done several years ago when I was still with APA, which dealt with this whole theme of integrating hazard mitigation into the planning process.
Right.
And we presented a series of case studies of large and medium-sized and small communities to show that, regardless of the level of size of your community, one way or another, there are resources, there are tools, there are ideas that can be put forward to make your community more resilient, to ensure that you're taking care of the hazards that do exist in your community, and integrating them with other planning priorities. Just as an example, one of the smallest community we profiled was in Utah. It was a small rural community northeast of Salt Lake City, 7,000 people up in the mountains, Wasatch Mountains. But rural community quality of life was one of the lodestars for this particular county. They were able to marry that with attention to issues like landslides and seismic hazards, because the more development came in, the more they had to pay attention to, is this really development that can withstand these kinds of pressures, or certainly not contribute to creating more problems with regard to issues like landslides and slope stability and just the quality of the mountains themselves.
So I think, most communities would say they want to grow, whether it's expand physically or population, and this really gives us a lot to think about how we grow and how land use impacts that.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was precisely the point in that particular community, but also in the others as well. A couple of the others, Warren, Massachusetts, which is on the neck of Cape Cod, right along the Cape Cod Canal, was one of them. Roseville, California. The lessons out of there were that making your community safe, securing your community against the various hazards that they faced, whether it was hurricanes in the Northeast or flooding and other issues, seismic issues in Roseville, actually is a marketable commodity for economic development purposes, because you want people to feel that this is a safe place to invest. That it's not, you don't invest and then all of downtown gets washed out, let's say.
Yeah.
That you're thinking about these issues and taking care to make this a safe place to put your money.
And obviously for us in Dubuque, we've thought a lot about floodplains, the B Branch project. And you talked about how the data on that is changing for communities so quickly, and the 100-year flood doesn't look like it might have looked 10 years ago. And how do you think about that as a planner and really prepare for what a city might be 30 years from now?
Well, there's two things that I think are particularly important, both related to getting the public to a place where they understand that the floodplain is not a stationary object. There is not one line drawn forever that says 100-year floodplain. And in any event, we've had plenty of floods that exceed the 100-year level anyway.
Yes.
And so you need to understand why the floodplain is a changing, dynamic issue. It changes in part because every development, everything that we build somewhere in the watershed somehow affects the size of that floodplain, and the more impermeable surface, more big objects we put in the path of the water has to go somewhere, that floodplain expands.
Yes.
So you start from that. You get out from under these silly discussions of why am I in the floodplain now and I have to buy flood insurance? Well, you were always in the floodplain anyway. You just didn't know it. You didn't understand the risk that you already had. So there's that, but there's also a real need for communities to come to terms with the fact that climate change is changing the nature of the weather we are going to experience, not even just along the seacoast with sea level rise, but here in the Midwest, because it changes precipitation patterns. More big storms mean more challenges in terms of stormwater drainage, and all these issues then affect the viability of continuing to build in some of these questionable areas. So we have to look at where we choose to build and how we choose to build when we do.
Absolutely.
If you think about that, then you can grow safely.
Yes.
And in fact, one of the things that we had in the report that we produced at APA that we were talking about yesterday is a safe growth audit for communities, and it allows them to look through a series of questions and examine their ordinances, examine their subdivision designs, and say, is this really going to result in a safe community when we're done developing this, or is it going to add to the problem?
Really takes something that's big and conceptual and figures out, well, what do we do about today and what do we do about it?
Take it step by step.
Absolutely. Well, I know that the attendees really appreciated your information, so thank you for sharing it with us at this conference.
Welcome.